I started really diving into learning more about it, and then I realized that I kind of enjoyed the management side of things, or the idea of managing for wildlife, more than I did hunting almost. And that's what led me to pursue my degree in wildlife after I got laid off.
Welcome back, everybody, to this week's episode of the Texas Public Podcast. We've been looking forward to this show for so very long because we've got our own resident Texas Parks and Wildlife biologist assigned to some of the counties that house our wonderful national forest that we all love to suffer in so much. So it's going to be a cool show. We've been working on getting this together for such a long time. So, Jon, we really appreciate you jumping on, man. Jon Mcleod, how are you, man?
I'm doing good. Thank y'all for having me, man.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. And Rudy, what's going on, brother?
Another day in paradise, brother. Excited to be on here with Mr. Jon and talk about the good old woods that we all so love to be in.
Man, it kind of feels good to do a podcast in the afternoon, in the daylight.
Yeah,
we
it's
still
been a
got
while.
we still got stuff to look forward to. It's like I'm not exhausted. I'm not tired. So I'm feeling a little bright eyed and bushy tailed because I think we're gonna learn some cool stuff and cover some cool facts, I think. So Jon actually came to our meet and greet, and man, just been super communicative, giving out cards, just offering up any sort of advice, offering up to help us age deer, just really kind of helping educate us on kind of some of the programs they've got in place, some of the data that he works with. And we're just like, man, you've got to come on and help share some of this stuff. And he's like, absolutely. So we've been working on this for a long time now. So really looking forward to it and appreciate it, man. So why don't you just give us a little background on what led you to this career path and being a wildlife biologist for the state of Texas?
Yes, sir. Yeah. So I guess initially, right after high school, I took a job in the oil and gas industry, like a lot of people here in East Texas, and I did that for several years up until 2016, when gas prices got terrible and they were doing layoffs, and I got caught up in the layoff. And I figured if I couldn't have a job where I made decent money, I may as well go do a job I love. And so started taking classes for wildlife and fishery science at local junior college, and then transferred to A&M, where I got my degree in wildlife fishery science. I graduated in 20. After graduation, I took a job with the State Parks Division as a wildland fuels and habitat technician. And in that role, I would travel the entire state, working on state parks, prepping them for prescribed burns, doing mulching projects, opening up the canopy to get more forage on the ground, uh, doing pretty much anything you could think of that's beneficial for wildlife and improves habitat on state parks across the state. I did that for about 11 months. And at the 11-month mark, I was lucky enough to land a job as a district biologist in Fort Bend in Austin County. And so from 2021 until 2024, I worked as a district biologist for Fort Bend in Austin County. I did a brief stint after that with a private company that allowed me to get back to Montgomery County. Uh, this is where I grew up, and I was just ready to get back home for family reasons. And then shortly after I got here with that private company job, uh, the position for Montgomery Walker County opened up with Texas Parks and Wildlife, and I was fortunate enough to land the job, which is basically a dream job for me, getting to be a biologist in the counties I grew up in. So yeah, I was very fortunate to land up or wind up here, and looking forward to seeing where it goes.
Yeah, man, what a journey though. Like it's really kind of inspiring to start off, in a totally one direction and then just decide you're just going to pivot and like, hey, if this is going to happen to me, I'm not going to let it happen to me. I'm going to react with something positive, and find something to go after. And now look at you, all these years later, man, you're off and running, long, pretty cool career ahead of you, I think. So that's awesome, man. I like that
I
story.
truly
So
appreciate it.
yeah. So tell us a little about the the hunting background of yourself. So, you know, as far as your experience growing up and kind of where you're at now. You
How
know,
that ties into you being a biologist, because I'm sure that has a lot to reason why you are a biologist, I'd imagine.
No, yeah, absolutely. Yes, so growing up, I was not in a hunting family. We didn't really hunt. My church group growing up went on one hunt when I was like 10 years old, but I didn't get anything. And my brother got one, but uh, never really stuck. Did a bunch of fishing throughout high school. And then in the oil and gas job I had, one of my best friends who worked there with me was a big time hunter, lifelong hunter, and he was trying to get me to go duck hunting with him. And I remember he was, working on me about, hey, come duck hunt. And I was pushing off like, who wants to go shoot a duck? Why would you? Who would shoot a duck? I didn't even know that was a thing.
Why are they so mad at them poor little ducks?
I don't know. I understand now, but up to that point, I did not know. And so he convinced me. I finally gave in, went with him, and we shot three redheads on a river in East Texas, and that's not real common, but it was enough ducks to get me stuck for life. Where I decided I wanted to hunt, and shortly after that, he lived button up to some public land here in East Texas, and he started noticing some deer in his backyard. And so we decided, well, heck, let's run some trail cameras back there. So we ran some cameras and started getting some good deer. And so we decided to start trying to hunt out there. And it took us a season or two to figure it out, but we both eventually took some deer back there. And, that's all what led me into, wanting to be a biologist because I started diving down the hole of, how do I find where these deer are on public land? Because, you can't put a feeder out and try to bring them to you. You can't food plot. And you got to learn about deer and you got to figure out where they want to be and you got to put yourself there. And so that's kind of what sparked my interest in biology. And I started really diving into learning more about it. And then I realized that I kind of enjoyed the management side of things or the idea of managing for wildlife more than I did hunting almost. And that's what led me to pursue my degree in wildlife after I got laid off.
yeah. And interesting fact about that, and this just happened not too long ago. Completely by chance, far as I know, you got a picture of Rudy on one of your trail cameras, or on a trail camera somewhere.
I did. Yes, I did. It was in a spot I've had some cameras for a few years, but this spot where he found my camera was pretty close to the road, but it's on a pretty hard difference line, and there's always a scrape on this little post oak that is right there. And I just was curious to see, when it opens up and what's there. And I normally don't run my stuff that close to the road, but he sent me a text message with my trail camera that had my name and phone number on it, and was like, I think I know this guy. So yeah, that happened.
Yeah, I found that like 2022. Was it, Seth? The dates that I had on those pins and
Yeah,
pictures.
yeah.
Well, it says foot's all busted, and I was like, "Look, bro, I found this a few years ago. It was opened up October 9th. I had a fresh bed in there. I was like, who knows? He's coming. He's got to be checking this private down the road over here, and bedding real close to go over there at night. And so I walked up and I looked up and I seen your camera. And first thing I noticed is the scrape hadn't opened up yet. And then I look up and there's your camera, and I was just like, oh damn, someone set up a camera over here.
Yep.
And I was like, I'm gonna go look, and sure enough, because I thought I saw something written on the front of it, and I was like, "Shall we go see what that says?" And I was like, "I'll be like, oh well,
Oh yeah.
it's what
Oh
it is."
no. All right. So
I did find some fresh rubs and scrapes in there, not too far, so they're in there. I'm
yeah,
starting to get pictures of them now, so
Rudy was kind of
cruising
talking it up.
through.
So what are you saying? You went in there to scout that spot for me? Is that what you're saying?
I was just making sure it was still
No,
hot.
because that ain't true.
You know, dude, honestly, I like just watching the bucks that go in there in that doe bedding area and chase them does around. There's some good ones.
Yeah.
I have
Oh
a
yeah.
camera in there, and I just go in there and change. I've hunted it one time out of the years that I've known about it. I like hunting a little bit further down, but
All right.
Yep. No,
So
it's a good spot.
oh
so
yeah, it's thick.
that's always good. So John, we'll
That's
we'll
when them
let
bucks
you.
like to hang out on that thick.
So we'll
It's a
let you
lot of
put your
greenbrier, hollyberry, yopon thicket. It's real open, canopy, so real thick underbrush. And then the pines that are there, you've got, some real young 10-year-old or just real thick, real shaded. And then you've got the stuff that's already been thinned out. This is just real open for that beauty berry and that underbrush to grow in there. So
yeah,
Yep.
look pretty good for some of the
it's
pictures I saw too.
it's prime area for a lot of deer.
Yeah.
Probably see a spike, I'm sure y'all still got spike tag.
Well, you got one less tag now, but we already covered that story, so I have to go listen to that one in a different one.
Yeah.
So
Let's talk
John,
about this stuff.
yeah, we'll let you put your professional hat back on there after that. Just wanted to get a little bit of insight into you. So really curious to you talked about some of your early roles, being like a field technician and things like that, but as far as your role now, can you give us some insight into kind of like your current roles and responsibilities, like, and what that kind of looks like in your type of position?
Yeah. So being a district biologist covering specific counties like Montgomery and Walker, Texas Parks and Wildlife has people set, and sometimes we have four to two counties, depending on population or MLD responsibilities. But as a private land biologist, most of my job revolves around assisting private landowners to manage for wildlife on their property, be it through the MLD program, cost share programs for controlled burning or thinning, brush control, or even prairie restoration through our pub program. Uh, but we also help people with their wildlife taxes. So Texas has the wildlife tax valuation, and I help landowners transfer their property from agriculture to wildlife as well. So it's pretty varied in responsibility. Uh, and some of the other things we do is we do regulatory surveys for game animals in our counties. So in my counties, we do urban and call count surveys for dove. We do bird banding in some counties. We do regulatory surveys for whitetail deer. We have summer surveys for turkey in counties where they're present. And so it's pretty broad as far as responsibilities go.
Yeah, it's. I remember I came across some. I think these were mostly forestry guys. I, don't know, I guess they were forestry department. They were doing like sparrow counts one time when I was out there, and it was one of my first encounters with some of our forestry professionals out there doing work, and it was really intriguing. Got to talk to some of those guys for a good while. So, which kind of brings me to my next question: like, what is the Texas Parks and Wildlife's relationship kind of with the forestry department? Do you guys kind of work together? Y'all cross
Oh,
paths in different projects and things like that?
yeah, there's definitely a collaborative effort, especially on the WMAs where you see um, they work with the national forest. So uh, there's Sam Houston, Alabama Creek, and Moore Plantation, or a few that come to mind where it's national forest property. It's managed as a WMA. Yeah, and in those cases, a lot of times the Forest Service still does a lot of the management. Forest Service still does the control burning. They're still in charge of the timber thinning for the most part. But with Parks and Wildlife, a lot of times our responsibility lies with the game animal situation on those WMAs. So we'll do the surveys for deer is one of the things we do. They do some prairie restoration projects, like I'm sure where you saw the sparrow counts going on
Mm-hmm.
was probably one of those prairie restorations that's out there on the national forest. Um, and also the state or Parks and Wildlife will do food plots out there as well. But
Yeah, I have seen some of the food plots out there. It's been a while, but at certain areas that I go, they're just. It seems like they mostly take advantage of just kind of natural open areas. They don't like do any like timber clearing just to install food plots. They just kind of take advantage of the existing wildlife openings and even like right of ways and pipelines. It seems like to me. So But
Yep.
you,
Yeah, that's what I've noticed is they tend to be in areas that are already open, and that we do provide, or the Forest Service provides a list of GPS coordinates of all those food plots that are out there. And I actually have, they shared with me a list of the seed that they're putting out this year. They're putting out turnips, clover, oats, rye, and winter wheat in those food plots this winter. So,
oh, cool. So they share like GPS coordinate locations of where they've put all these in?
yeah, yeah, they share. You just have to go to the ranger station there on 1375, and they'll give you a little printout of the coordinates for each of the food
Do
plots.
do those places change year to year, like the locations, or do they try to use the same location site by site?
I'm not sure if they change annually. I know some of the ones that I hunt near. I've never actually hunted the food plots, but some of the ones that are near some of the areas I hunt, I've seen them go in every single year. But I'm not sure about if they rotate them.
Okay. Um, I mean, so with these food plots being laid out, I mean, are there going back a little bit? Are there any kind of like surveys that they do for the? I know you said you work with the public. Are you aware of any surveys they do for the public land?
Yeah, yeah. So, uh, depending on the WMA, and I guess the accessibility of it, they'll change their survey type. So on WMAs, we utilize two surveys typically. We use camera surveys and spotlight surveys. Um, on the public land closest to me, they use spotlight surveys, and every year they'll drive the same routes they drive every single year throughout the forest, and they have visibility. They've shot every 10th mile, left and right of the truck with a laser rangefinder during daylight hours. And that's how they get the approximate acreage that they're surveying. And then at night, with two observers in the back of the truck on a rack and a driver, they'll drive that same route, uh, and they'll observe all the bucks, does, and fawns and unidentified deer, because inevitably there will be some that are unidentified uh, along that route, and that's how they'll get the approximate deer per acre uh, in our public lands. But for the camera surveys, what they try to do is they have a camera station set up every 100, 200 acres, give or take, and they'll put some bait out, and they count all the bucks, does, and fawns photographed, but then they also keep a separate tally of individual or unique bucks.
Hmm.
You may get that same buck, 100 times on camera, but if he's unique, he's only counted once for the unique tally. And then we'll have, let's say, 10 bucks that are unique, but you have 500 doe photos, 250 buck photos, and you know another 200 fawns photos. You'll apply the ratios of the bucks, does, and fawns from the number of photos to the number of individual bucks, with some correction factors from research from MSU, based on the number of days they survey, and that's how they get the approximate population. Uh,
Eh,
and they're not always. I'm not gonna say it's like 100% accurate.
yeah,
It's
sure.
just a metric to base off, are we trending upwards or downwards over time. It's not this survey said there's a hundred deer per square mile out here. That's probably not the case, but it's just, is it going up or down over time is really what we're monitoring.
And when you're talking
So
about the camera survey technique specifically, that's assigned to what type of property?
So some WMAs, one of the ones I'm aware of that uses this is uh, like Old Sabine Bottom up north of Tyler. It's the accessibility out there is super limited. You couldn't drive and do a spotlight survey, so camera surveys work really well out there. It's just regularly flooded bottomland hardwood habitat, and there's really no road system out there, and so
Hmm.
that's the way they conduct their surveys.
Okay,
So
gotcha.
with these surveys, this is also how they average out how many doe permits they put out a year.
I believe so. I believe
Okay.
that's how they kind of determine that. basically, because that's another thing. It's the benefit of the Forest Service working with Parks and Wildlife is on general forest property like uh, the Davy Crockett, Angelina, or the Sabine, where it's not a partnership. Does can only be harvested during archery or muzzleloader seasons, where in those partnership WMAs or that are national forests, you actually get to harvest does if you get a permit during general season, which is a huge benefit to some people, especially those fortunate enough to draw those permits.
Mm-hmm. That system's never mind. I never get one. That's all I'm saying.
I get them I get
Rudy
'em every
gets them all the
time.
time. I think
I'm
he's got.
about
Three
one for
times, got
seven.
them 3 times.
I think
But
he's got connections.
I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but I use that permit when I go process a deer. I usually get that deer processed.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe they keep tally like, okay, this person's actually utilizing the tag. I don't know.
Yeah.
I had I had a theory before I started working with the state that because I filled out the survey results every year, because every person who gets that permit gets a survey in the
Yeah.
mail or I think email now. But I would
Yep.
fill out the survey results. I would utilize my permit when I got it, and then ever since I started working with the state, I feel like they discriminate against me getting permits now because I'm 1 for 5 since I've been with the state. So.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, so maybe you don't get them. Don't work for the state, you won't get it. No, I mean, so another thing, like, and we didn't actually put this in the questions, but it just kind of came to my mind with this study that you guys had a while back. It used to be a 13-inch rule only, one buck, forest out here close to home, and when they changed that, it went to a 1 13-inch buck or better and a spike. And I'm
Hmm.
imagining those surveys had something to do with that law changing, maybe.
So I wasn't a part of that process, but I would imagine it's because uh, over time the deer density out in the national forest around us has increased um, quite a bit since 1986. So uh,
Yeah.
it's more than likely due to just a deer abundance and any chance Parks and Wildlife has that we can
Right.
expand opportunity to hunters, we're going to do it because uh, that's our bread and butter, and we want people out there hunting.
So,
So,
to tag on to Rudy's question, you mentioned in the surveys, and I think I remember like if we talked at the like meet and greet, like you've already done some, you're already aware of some surveys that have been done over the summer and things like that. So, do you have any data points that can kind of tell us or share like what kind of some of the local or regional surveys are telling us as far as deer numbers? Maybe like within the recent 3 to 5 year range, and then also maybe like the 20-year historical. Maybe what people can
what do we know?
expect. Yeah, and what do
That's the
we know?
question.
Yeah, so the surveys that I was a part of this summer were a part of our regulatory surveys that are broken out among deer management units, and those are kind of spread out over multiple counties. But the surveys for the public land this year, I wasn't a part of those just because they had enough staffing and interns. But I do have the results. Um, and in 1986, when they at least the data set that I was given started, the average or approximate deer per 1,000 acres was about 28 deer per 1,000 acres.
Hmm.
Whereas today, the 3 year average or the trend line average is showing about 60 deer per 1,000 acres. And if we convert that to square miles, it's about 38 deer per square mile, and in 1986, it's 18 deer per square mile. So
Wow, that's actually probably quite a bit better than I even expected it to be. And I know there's a lot of different factors that go into that, but I think just overall, I think that's quite a bit higher than what I thought. I mean, I don't know what do you think about that, Rudy?
I mean, I feel like there's more deer out there.
I mean now I see more deer these days than once upon a
Yeah.
time when I used to. So I could see how it makes a little more sense, but there's some people that are like, man, there's no way there's
Well,
40
I can
deer out
tell you
there
this:
on
in
a
the
thousand acres.
20 years of hunting this forest out here, I can tell you, I spent a lot of time in these woods, and there was a lot of hunts where I didn't even see a deer. Now, I was either that bad of a hunter, and I learned that much in the now, or we just got that much more deer now because there's not often I go a sit without seeing a couple deer, and that's pretty good.
Or
So
you spooked them all.
I smell bad.
But I mean, that is encouraging though, because at least it says it's over time. Some of the management practices are working, the harvest practices are working, and it's overall we're trending towards a better hunter's experience. I mean, is that kind of still the consensus? I mean,
Yeah, I think it's a testament of the good habitat management that the Forest Service, in conjunction with Parks and Wildlife, is doing, as well as the good job hunters are doing adhering to antler regs. I think that's another thing that probably helped push some of these numbers up. Is there's a fairly it looks like there's a decent increase when you look at starting from about 2009 uh, up to current. It looks like it's bumped up quite a bit. In 2009, I believe, is when antler regs went into place in this area. So I think
mm,
people having a hold off of a certain age class of bucks may help push some of that population up a bit.
yeah, I think it was frustrating at first. I certainly remember that. Man, I can't believe that was 2009, but it sounds familiar because I do remember the very first year, like almost. I think it was honestly the first like 8 point I ever saw while I was hunting by myself, bow hunting on a lease. It was the first year of the regulations, and I couldn't shoot it. I was in a big double. They called it a double barrel ladder stand. I think it was a summit stand, and I drug it off in the woods. And I watched this buck like just browse around on my little scattered corn for like 10 minutes, and I was like, I was only, I don't know how old I was. That's 2009. It sounds like later than the restriction came up, but I was pretty young. I was 20 or a little more. I don't know, but I just had to watch that thing. But and a lot of people complained at the beginning, but the correlation probably doesn't lie. But overall, in the long term, I think it's been a good thing. Still seems strange to out of staters, but I think we've gotten pretty accustomed to it, and I think overall it's done a good job.
Oh yeah, I think the reason we selected the 13-inch rule is in general, and we manage for uh, not the exception, but the rule. And so, in general, most bucks at 3.5 years or older are going to be at least 13 inches wide. Whereas we did like an antler point restriction, like a four on one side, or
Mm-hmm.
you severely risk high grading the population with the you know and a yearling that's a 4 point on one side is probably the last deer you want to harvest at 1.5 years old, because
Yep.
if he's already 4 point on one side at 1.5, his potential at 3.5 is much greater. And so that's the deer we really want to protect him to that older age class. But uh, the whole purpose of that regulation as well was not for trophy hunting or making bucks bigger. The general consensus of the rule was to just get bucks
With age
harvested.
on.
Yeah, we wanted average harvest for bucks going from yearling to 3.5 or older, and it certainly worked well.
And there is a lot of arguments in that, as far as people talking about that, how that law has not benefited and how it can affect in the long run poor genetics being bred out throughout the woods and not having the opportunity of killing a 3.5 year every 13-inch 3.5 2.5 year old deer is taking out the gene pool of giving better genetics, right? So because you're leaving all the basket racks, the big thick 4 pointers, the bucks that you would never want to reproduce, but it's a large scale. It's a little bit different, and I think I've had this argument a lot with a few of my friends, and I just say, man, I think if it was that bad, they wouldn't be doing it this way, you know.
Yeah, in the counties I came from, Austin County was one of the original six that they implemented the antler regs in. And so that since 2002, they've had antler regulations in those counties. I think it's Colorado, Austin, Lavaca, Lee, Fayette, and maybe Washington. I'm not sure exactly on those six, but uh, they've looked at antler quality every year since they've implemented that. And the average inside spread of a deer 3.5 and older harvested in those counties has been either 15 or 15.1 inches uh, the entire 22, 23 years. Um, and another thing is, you know,
Good
on
average.
yeah,
That's a
and
really good average.
oh yeah,
A
but
20-inch spread, 18 to 20-inch spread being an average is pretty dang good.
no, well,
No,
no, the average is 15.1. So
Oh, 15.
yeah.
Okay.
yeah, 15.1. Sorry,
Rudy's like, I'm
came
about to
through a
go
little.
hunt me a new spot.
No, no, but yeah, and a part of that is the corral continuum too. So in captive or high fence situations, the chance for genetics being altered through selective removal is a lot greater versus, you know, 100+ thousand acres of public land. Uh, there's no control over, what deer are left to live. It's pure random, and then we only see 50% of the phenotypes that are out there through uh, deer's antlers, and lots of research has gone into that. They've done several studies in Texas about antlers and the culling and whether you can change genetics on the landscape.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the studies was the Comanche Ranch study. They had three treatment areas. They had a control where they did nothing. They had a moderate and an intensive unit. And in that area, they were capturing deer from helicopters. So they were catching them, bringing them to a table, and if they were outside of the culling criteria, uh, they were removed. And so they were getting to actually look at these deer on a table before they removed them. So there was no accidentally shooting the deer you wanted to keep or whatever. And in the moderate, I'll explain I guess, the criteria for removal in each treatment unit. For the intensive, they removed any deer that was a yearling that had less than 6 points,
Hmm.
any 2.5-year-old buck that had less than 8 points, and any 3.5 to 4.5-year-old buck that had less than 9 points. And then any deer that was 5.5 or older that scored below 145 inches, Boone and Crockett, they were removed from the intensive culling area. And these are high fence pastures. And on the moderate, they only culled 3.5 to 4.5-year-old bucks that had less than 9 points, or 5.5 and older deer that were less than 145 inches. And basically, what they found over time was that, and the intensive culling pastures, they heavily skewed the sex ratio down to 6 does per one buck, which can cause a negative feedback loop because you're elongating fawning, and late-born fawns have a lower likelihood of turning into branch antlered or good bucks that would be outside of that culling criteria. And then in the moderate culling pastures, they removed anywhere from 25 to 45% of the population, depending on the environmental situation that you're in. Because in South Texas, rainfall kind of dictates what antlers are going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of that, treatment period, I forget how many years it was. Uh, Basically, the average antler size, was the same across all three pastures. So they were never able to change the genetics on the range.
So, but and not able to make a significant impact just by culling by points,
Nope,
right?
no, and then there was another study that was done where they were looking at uh, deer and their actual genetics, and that they were able to see who they sired. And one of the bucks that would have been in the coal category, uh, he was an 8 point. He was 123 inches, Ghost Boone and Crockett, and he had the highest breeding value in the entire study. And one of the bucks next to him was 159 inch keeper buck, um, and he was the lowest 10% of breeding value. So, people would have decided, oh, we need to keep this buck because he's 100, almost 160 inches growth Boone and Crockett. We need to keep him because he's going to be a good breeder. He produced some of the worst offspring based on looking at who he sired. And so that's where, culling, you don't get the entire picture based on antler characteristics. There's relatively low heritability based on what we see in antlers.
Man, that's interesting.
Okay. But since we're getting into a lot of data, I wanted to know what's the average age of a deer taken in Montgomery and Walker County, and what are maybe the record bucks for those areas that you know of?
Okay, yeah. So looking at the data that I have
Native
from,
genetic records, native,
yeah,
not nothings.
so looking at harvest, the average age of harvest uh, across the Montgomery Walker County is about mm, it's like a bell-shaped curve. So in the middle is 3.5, and out of 272 samples, almost 80 are 3.5, and then 42 are 4.5, and 28 are 5.5, and 9 or 6 plus.
Is that bucks and
And then
does or just bucks?
that's everything.
Okay.
That's everything.
Yep, and it's mostly bucks because we get our information from people.
Checking in at the way stations
Yep, when that used to be
or going to
mandatory.
so that's explain that. Like, I'm just not to cut off the first question I asked, but why did they do that? Why did they stop making it mandatory to try to go in and weigh them in person?
I don't know exactly the reason why they stopped doing that. That was a decision that was made before I was here,
Gotcha.
uh, so I'm not sure.
Okay.
So to Rudy's
So
question,
back to the
yeah, you mentioned that the data you just gave, John, was that more like general private land based data?
So
And
that was everything, private
okay,
and public. But when we compare, private to public, there's quite a discrepancy. So on public land, the percentage of harvest that is 3.5 years of age or older is about 43%. So less than half of our harvest is 3.5 or older. Where on private property, almost 70% of the harvest is 3.5 and older.
mm.
Um, and it just comes down to different values. I think on private property, people a lot of times are more comfortable with letting a buck walk or try to make it to that older age class, uh, just because it's their property and they don't really have to worry about another person harvesting. Where on public, a lot of times people are just going for opportunity, and they just want a chance to shoot a deer, whether it's a 1.5 year old spike who's dancing in front of you, uh, or a 6.5 year old buck that just happens to be unfortunate enough to stand there. But what's most likely is the yearling buck standing in front of you on public, and it's
Yeah.
just because um, they're the most visible. They haven't learned quite yet, and so I think and they're probably also the most abundant, and so that's just where opportunity lies. And there's nothing wrong with that. I 100%. If I'm hunting public, if a deer that meets the category of legal stands in front of me, I'm there for opportunity, and so I'm going to take advantage of it.
So if I remember right, one of the data tables we were kind of talking about through text a couple weeks ago, that 1.5 year old category on the public side of the data set was the highest. Is that right?
By far, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it was
42 is 25% of the data set, or from public, about 25%, or actually no, 30% was from that yearling age class.
yeah. Well, it is what it is. Like you said, a lot of
so
spikes getting
over
registered.
time, what are the biggest bucks that you've seen as far as scoring wise going on the charts for Walker in Montgomery County?
Yeah, so for Walker County, the largest I have record of is 208, and that's a low fence property um, in Walker County. That's a gross boon and crockett score of 208. The next closest is 193 and 3/4 or 6/8. Uh, and then the third place is uh, actually no, second place is a 198 and an 8.
Wow. And
So we have 3 from Walker County that are the 190 plus range um, that were killed on low fence property, free ranging. Um, and some of these places are, you know, nowhere near fencing. So it's just a true testament of what happens if deer, especially deer with high potential, are left to get to maturity, what they can really turn into.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree.
that's
and
incredible.
where we get these records is through the Texas Big Game Awards program, and it's a program that's done in partnership with Parks and Wildlife and the Wildlife Association or TWA. And so, any hunter in Texas who harvests a deer that they want scored typically can contact a local biologist. I'm a certified Texas Big Game Award scorer, and most wildlife biologists assigned to counties are certified as well for TBGA scoring. And in our region, to qualify for TBGA, you just have to harvest a typical buck that's 120 inches net score or a non-typical 140 net score. And that changes by region. So, like South Texas, their criteria is a little higher because the average is a little bit better. I think for them, a typical has to be 130, uh, but it's not much higher than our criteria for trophy hood.
Yeah. Interesting. So one of the last questions I had regarding like, the studies and like the data that you guys are continue to collect and organize, is there anything that you got, any projects that you guys have going on currently that you're sort of working on improving on, or is there anything kind of new coming down the pipe, or some anything that you guys are working on?
Yeah, we do have a study that was done prior to my arrival where they collared some deer at one of the WMAs in Nacogdoches. Um, they collared, I believe it was 19 deer, 21 deer, somewhere in there, with GPS collars, and they turned them loose. And we're collecting data points via GPS over a 2-year period. They were just seeing basically how deer reacted to hunter pressure and how they utilize the terrain. We don't have a lot of information from it yet, just because the information is so complicated and analyzing so many data points it takes someone who's really specialized to do that. And so uh, we're working on getting all that data reviewed and where we can make a publication on that. But some of the things we did glean from it was that bucks have larger home ranges than does. Does average home range, I believe, was around the 300-acre mark, and their core was about 160 acres. Where bucks, based on their personality, could be anywhere from 2,000 acres for their home range down to 600 acres, 500 acres,
Mm.
and it's just based on their personalities and kind of just like people. Some of us are homebodies, and some of us paint the town red every chance we get. And deer are the same way. They have personalities in the way they utilize their landscape.
Yeah. So, since you mentioned the pressure aspect, is that one of the kind of the first of its kind of studies where we're going to get some hunter pressure impact data, like in some of our regions? Is that kind of the first of its data set that we'll see, or do we have anything else published that shows details based on hunter pressure?
I'm not aware of, at least to our area, of any other hunter pressure data or research that's been done for whitetail deer. I know in Oklahoma they've done a lot of studies with, they put GPS on hunters and they had deer that were collared as well, and they were seeing basically how deer avoided areas that hunters tended to go to. But as far as in our area, I'm not aware of another study that looked at that.
Okay. So, kind of sticking. Do y'all
Sorry,
have?
I got a package. These dogs might go crazy. It's my GPS for my tracking collars. Sorry.
Ooh. No, it's all good.
The dogs might go crazy. The only reason I said something, sorry.
Yeah, it's all good, man. So,
You're good.
do we have any data on regionally regional fawning rates, like survival rates, or anything like that? Like, I've seen some numbers across the landscape from different states. Do we have an idea on how that looks for our areas?
Yeah, so for the piney woods in general, we typically see around 40% on average, but I mean there's high variability with that year to year. And then when you look at the surveys that we conduct through um, our regulatory surveys, the surveys that are done on public, and then also in the MLD program, landowners conduct surveys for their permits, and I have the data from that as well. And in general, for Walker County this year, the average was kind of low. It was about 20%. But I think a lot of that would be attributed to just the visibility. We've had so much rainfall
Hmm.
this throughout this spring and summer, and so if that fawn is laying down or even if it's standing up, there's beautyberry or grass, whatever in the way. The likelihood that you'll observe it on a spotlight survey is much lower than an adult doe. Um, and then on public, we're looking at a 3-year average of about 25%. But I think both of those estimates of 20 and 25% are underestimating the actual number that's there. And it's just because, fawns are so much smaller than does. And so I think they're just getting missed based on survey techniques.
Yeah, I know some of the other typical numbers I've heard that are like the averages. Like a 60% is like kind of a high rate. That's a good fawning rate. And then like you said, the 40% range is kind of average, and like your lows is like 15 to 20. But a lot of those are usually coming out of agricultural type areas. That I've read about. Like you said, probably a lot better visibility. A lot more farm edges, cut crops. Where they can see 40 deer at a time. On
Yep,
the
yep,
landscapes.
yep.
But
And with the quality of our habitat as well, it's providing pretty, especially in the national forest where they do controlled burning, timber management. Uh, it's providing some exceptional fawning habitat. So they have the habitat needed to successfully hide and raise their young from predators. And so I think a lot of times it's just a symptom of uh, limited visibility for us.
right. So so kind of staying on, kind of starting at that early life cycle of a deer. Um, are there any type of kind of native browse for those guys that are out there, hoofing it in the piney woods? Is there any sort of high quality browse that somebody should learn to identify? Maybe even, we could touch on the acorn, crop, mass crop, but is there any type of high quality browse that you guys recognize that that you could kind of encourage folks to look for and learn from as far as being available to a deer?
Yeah, so the state has some publications on browse surveys. So a lot of the information from those browse surveys can be used to learn some of the important plants uh, in ecoregions and just important plants to deer in general. Um, we don't have any that are specifically guided for the piney woods that I'm aware of, but we do have a publication for the south central region of Texas, and it's just called the common browse plants utilized by whitetail deer in south central Texas, and it breaks the browse out into 3 different categories. We have first choice, second choice, and third choice. And just to clarify, this south central one does not cover the piney woods. It covers like from Waller County, Brazoria, Matagorda, Washington through Colorado, but a lot of the plants that are on this list show up on the plants that we look out for in the piney woods.
Mm-hmm.
So it's got like Alabama supplejack or rattan. It's a vining plant we find throughout the piney woods, but it's not really common to find in areas with decent deer densities just because the deer prefer it. Then we also see things like uh, bodark. Bodark is one of those trees that I tend to see heavily utilized for browse, regardless of ecoregion. Poison ivy, which is kind of shocking to a lot of people, tends to be pretty high on the preference list for whitetail deer. Um, and then hawthorn species. These have like the leaves kind of look like cilantro to me, and they have in
Mm.
the spring they have really pretty white flowers that are like clustered together with some like reddish spots on them. But those are some of the high preference ones I see. And then we also had there's a publication that was done in Nacogdoches that looked at browse utilized over the different seasons, and so it breaks it out in like summer, fall, winter. And for like the fall, a lot of what we see for like the highest use are going to be things like uh, blackberry tends to be pretty high in our area. Um,
Mhm.
Obviously any acorn crop that's especially water oak, white oak, we see high use on those when they're dropping. St. Andrew's cross, the little four, could be considered browse, maybe it's smaller plant and structure, but
Hmm.
I see it pretty regularly across the national forest, and it's utilized pretty heavily. Um, and then Carolina jasmine's another one that's used really heavily in the winter and fall. Oh, sassafras, that's another big one. Uh, we have it's pretty easy to identify. Sassafras has three different kinds of leaves on it. So it have like one lobe leaf, and it'll have a leaf that's split into two, and then three, all on the same plant. So it's
Wow.
kind of unique in the plant world.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. 'Cause one of the biggest challenges is, not everything is so lush early, but I'm always trying to figure out, when I'm walking and trying to relocate during the late season, it's like, man, you even more so in the early season, the late season, you got to know where they're feeding because that's probably where the majority of them are. They get so pockety, and I think they get pockety around, the preferred browse areas once everything's kind of, whatever's left unutilized and whatever's left that's kind of alive and healthy. And that's I always encourage people to at least start there, just to at least with the oak trees, and then move your way down to just browse the basic stuff. It,
Yeah,
yeah.
we have. There's a really good app for people's phones if they. It's something I utilize for learning plants as well. It's called Seek by iNaturalist. It's a free app that uses the camera to identify plants. For just looking at like uh, you know a leaf that looks pretty typical for most plants, it's not going to do a good job of identifying it just because it's not really unique. But if you have flowering plants and you can see that flower, it does a really good job of identifying based on that. Or if it has a very unique leaf structure, like sassafras I was talking about, or something as terrible as Chinese tallow, it's got a very unique leaf shape.
Is that
The
like
app does a really good job identifying it, and that can be a good starting point for hunters to learn about some of the plants in their area. And you can also look at plants and just see the utilization, because the way deer browse, when they pick at plants, they don't take the whole thing. They only take what is the best according to their nose. And so you'll see uh, pieces of stem or twig that are left, especially on browse plants, where they, bit it off and it's like kind of squared and ragged a little bit
mm-hmm.
where they bit through. And I do have some pictures I can share with y'all of some examples of some water oak being browsed and some hawthorn that I saw browse out in the national forest recently. I can share those with you and you can post them up there
Oh
if you'd
yeah,
like.
absolutely. But Rudy, remember when we were together, and we came across that creek bottom that kind of had a lush green kind of bankside, and we found like these little tuber type plants. What did we say they were called? When we looked them up. It's like elephant
Elephant ear
something,
or elephant's foot.
elephant's foot. We
Oh yeah, that gets browsed pretty regular out there.
Oh
I
my
see.
gosh, it was like it looked
Hammered.
like it looked like, I
hammered.
mean, it looked like somebody took a weed eater and just like was swafting back and forth until it was just down to just a bunch of little straight tubes just nipped off, and we were just like, man, we've got to see what this stuff is. And again, it was in the low bottom, about the bottom third of the bank, not where it was like super wet, but as you started to go up the bank side, and it was just like that was some of the most like obvious looking browse that I ever saw, and I know.
Yeah, I think the common name is common elephant foots or devil's grandmother. Is
Mm,
the common name for it. But I see that one browsed on very heavily when I'm walking out there, especially this time of year when
yeah,
it's popping up.
it was
It,
early season when we were out kind
yeah,
of scouting some new stuff. Well, I used to hunt up
it,
around Etoile outside of Lufkin, and they had a lot of partridge pea up there. Had like a little yellow flower on it.
oh yeah.
It grew a lot on the roadside, and my dad and I were walking the roadside, and I kept seeing just like pockets of yellow flowers. Then there'd be like a gap in the flowers. All the flowers were gone. You could see a bunch of doe tracks just walking down the. And I was like, they were like browsing on these little yellow flowers because they bloom and they don't bloom very long, from what I read.
Hmm.
And it was called a partridge pea. So it's just little cool stuff. If you just stop and take a picture, take a time to kind of check it out later, you'll recognize it maybe next time when you see it.
Yeah, and that's part of where as a hunter, you can turn from a hunter into a woodsman is just paying attention to the sign, like you and Rudy seeing that plant, like you noticed it was getting hammered, and you took the time to identify it. And over time, if you do that long enough, you'll start realizing patterns. Like, okay, this plant or this plant, I see them get hammered pretty regular, and you may even be able to view them as like nature's food plot. There's plenty of plants out there that are highly favored by deer that you can find out there, especially in pockets like that.
Yeah, because
We
we
know
all.
this because every year you hear about people on feeders. Hey man, I ain't seen no deer in like 2 weeks. I got a pile of corn there, man. I don't know what's going on. There's all kinds of food they'd rather eat than that corn.
Oh
So
yeah,
Yeah, and it's always I've seen, we all know that deer will like just eat about anything. People talk about all the beautyberry stuff and all that, but like you said, maybe where those specific advantages may come in when you can recognize those little specialized pockets that are just mowed off, and they're coming by there and they're getting that snack on the way to just kind of filtering out, where they're just gonna kind of browse all night, and then they're gonna chew on all the abundant stuff. But I've seen deer stomach full of yopon leaves. I've seen them munch on buckthorn, like, but they just nip at everything, as they're walking. But sometimes when they stop and really kind of hammer some stuff down, like it's just like as a team, they're just like, all right, we're just gonna. They just tear something up, and it's just like, man, you got to figure out what that is, because. What did you mention? You mentioned the other day some kind of something strawberry or some kind of berry bush that you said
uh,
they like it so much that if you actually find it, there's probably no deer there.
yeah, yeah. It's a strawberry bush, and it's pretty rare across the landscape just because at least I believe it deer browse it so heavily, or most herbivores will browse it. Uh, but yeah, it's called or strawberry bush. And I have not seen any on the landscape. Some of my coworkers have seen a few pockets of them here and there, but it's mostly in fence lines or along people's yards.
Yeah,
Uh,
because
not it's not really seen out on the landscape.
yeah, because it didn't sound familiar to me at all. Like I said, when it comes to berry stuff, if it ain't a blackberry or a beautyberry, I don't know much about it. But um, so getting a little bit more into the whitetail phases, is there any data that shares about our region about when these, we've all seen like heat maps for rut and all that kind of stuff. Do you guys have any breeding data that allows you to kind of narrow down? We all kind of have our ideas and thoughts, but maybe you could just kind of elaborate what those rut time frames maybe either are or are most likely to be.
Yeah, so for the piney woods, actually statewide, Texas did a chronology study where they took bred does late season through. hunter submission or just through collection themselves, or they looked at does that had been bred and they measured their fetus length. And then from measuring the fetus length on a scale, uh, anyone can buy the scale from like forestry supply or other like wildlife product websites. You can backdate when that doe was conceived based on the fetus size. And so for the Piney Woods region, they broke it out into north and south. And Montgomery Walker County falls into the south portion of it, and it Trinity, Polk, and all the way over to like Jasper, Newton County are going to be that south zone. North zone is going to be North Piney Woods is going to be like Angelina County. Uh, Not sure which some of those other ones are up there. I'm not familiar with the northern portions of Piney Woods, but from Angelina County all the way up to like almost Texarkana, and kind of like a C shape is the North Piney Woods region.
Mm-hmm.
And for the South uh, Piney Woods region, we saw the highest proportion of contraception is going to be November 12th. And for the North Zone, we're looking at November 22nd, based on the chronology study that was conducted in the 90s.
Interesting. That's pretty specific. Um,
Yeah, there's very little variation year to year on when peak breeding or conception happens. And it's because breeding in white-tailed deer is based on photo period. And that's a fancy word for saying how many hours the sun is in the sky. And that doesn't change year to year, it stays the same. And so their hormones are driven by photo period. So it should stay very consistent year over year. And they've done follow ups during when they first implemented antler regs. They did a follow up in 2006 or before antler regs in 2006, 2011, and 2016, where they continue to do some of this backdating. And the average peak breeding stayed the same uh, year to year. Their pregnancy rates ranges from anywhere from 94 to 97%. So based on our data, that old barren doe thing we hear about all the time,
mm-hmm.
this really isn't true. 96% on average does are bred year over year with about 1.7 fawns per doe. So twins are very likely. Um,
That's interesting too. I've I don't know. What do you think, Rudy? As far as like how many does you've seen out there? This is completely anecdotal type stuff, but I don't feel like I've seen a lot of does with twins.
Well,
That's
I can tell you right now where we're at. Where in fact where he's got me on camera. Been hunting down there for a little while. I've only lived out here 5 years. That's about as long as I've hunted out here by that area. But there's a little bottom not too far, and I've got a group of does that I've harvested off of every year, except for this year so far. And I probably won't, but I've seen twins out of two of the does in there, so four babies. With just two of them. Um, I shot one of the twins' moms. That was the first deer that last season set. And
mm-hmm.
then, I mean, I just seen a lot of them, like in that little group. And it's like, I can't keep up with how many are over there as one hunter. So, I mean, it's like they do need to be harvested, but I see what he's saying. Yes.
Yeah.
I
yeah,
think there's a lot of them.
and that's pregnancy rate. That's definitely not what actually makes it to the ground, or at least makes it off the ground.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah, it's just what was pregnant when we collected the fetuses, in January or December.
Oh,
I've never
very
killed a
true.
deer that late myself, and you know what I mean. Had a fetus in there.
Yeah.
I do know one time my uncle killed a deer in like the late November that
Hmm.
had a pretty decent sized fetus already in it.
No, yeah, and if you get that, it can be measured to backdate when contraception was, so you can at least see when that doe was bred based on fetus size.
Yeah, that's interesting because We talked about it this summer. I made a trip out to the hill country, and we all love going out there because you can see so much more, and you see
Deer everywhere.
you see so many deer. And I felt like that trip in particular, it was like every group of deer I saw, like the were mostly fawns, and it was like three does, and there'd be like eight fawns in there, and I'm be like they all had twins and triplets, and I'm like, golly, I'm like, it just like, no wonder there's so many deer out here. It's like every doe pops out two of herself or three of herself, it was just like fawns just running crazy, and I'm just like, seems like they have a little bit higher percentage for whatever reason across the landscape. I don't know. That was just my, my what my eyes, were telling my brain, so to speak. But I think we have quite a few deer. Like going back to what we were saying earlier, um, you just don't see them. They
Yeah,
slip
yeah.
by. They're hiding.
Yeah.
You can't possibly lay eyes on them all
But
across
there's
the
enough that
landscape.
you can pretty much pattern out some does, any given spot out here. I think, if you
Yeah.
do your homework enough, and
Well,
I don't
that's
know about you, man, but I've got deer out here that are patterned just from years of cameras being up.
well, I that's the thing. I always tell people one of the biggest things that helped me was just picking a block of woods like 500 acres and just learning it. Because granted, there's going to be woods that are better than others, but if you find a 500-acre chunk, there's deer in there somewhere. And if you learn them
Mhm.
good enough, you can stay on them. You can
Yeah.
follow them around. You can stay ahead of them in the years coming. The more you learn about them, in a chunk like that. So, granted, I've walked a lot of woods and not found much deer sign too. But I think in general, that's not. It wouldn't be too far off. That not deer. Not there's not deer in all the woods, but in all the woods there could be deer. You know,
And
kind
that's
of
part
thing.
of it. I think people are like, what is a lot of people say this all the time in the podcast community, hunting community. We are a life of instant gratification, right? So we want instant success. We want instant sightings. We want instant everything, good on the hunting side, but we don't want to sit there and put in 2 3 years of watching cameras and a year of not seeing deer and making those mistakes. That's where everybody is not willing to go, and it takes a lot of work to get to that point, like you said, of putting boots on the ground, getting the camera intel, when you are harvesting, being able to tell, hey, these deer were like, when you're watching your cameras and you've got fawns and you're able to take back that time, that gestation period, the 200 days to figure out when she was bred, or the whole nine. You know what I mean? So it's people want that instance, a gratification of getting something done and putting meat in the freezer, putting a Facebook up on social media pictures, whatever. But it's like, hey man, it took a lot of work to get there before those successful year after year after year came. You know, I think
Yeah.
that all this is just to help that learning curve and help them get there faster. You know,
Yeah. And like I said,
that's all we can do.
some of the areas I hunt, there's not a lot of deer there, and there's not the biggest deer there, but I've spent enough time there to know the deer that are there, what they do, and where they
He's
like to
lying.
and
There's
what they
good deer
like
in
to be.
there, and he knows
No,
when the big deer come in there too, like that don't live in there.
no, if that was true, things would be a lot more fun. That's
He
not
acts like he had such a horrible season last year.
that is not listen. That was I didn't shoot the tank, okay? I
Well,
got
that's because he's there this year. That's the
hopefully you're
one.
right, but that's kind of how I feel about it. It's like I would love to go hunt areas that have more deer numbers. I think there are certain parts of our regions and woods that I've seen like where man, I just seem to jump deer all the time. The deer numbers seem to be a little bit better, but just logistically, I can't always make the time to go. It might be better, and if that's your goal, go seek that out. Go find the better quality pockets or the better numbers. But you can always make a spot a good hunting spot if you learn it. If you learn it good enough and figure out what those deer do and kind of stay on them. But we kind of hit that enough. I kind of wanted to ask you about. I think we touched on this. If you have any details on this, because there's been a lot of I've got some friends in the Midwest and stuff that been a lot of news about like CWD and stuff like in Ohio and all that. And it's always been interesting because that's never been an issue for us here in Texas. I say on the scale that other people have, not nearly as much. Um, what kind of data do you guys, or what can you kind of maybe just educate us on, either CWD and how Texas sort of looks
or
for it?
even just diseases in general. Are there diseases and things that we need to be concerned of? To be looking at our deer populations, public and private. What's out there? We want the facts and what you know of in Texas.
Yeah. So I'll start with EHD. That huge outbreak that we're seeing out in the Midwest right now. Thankfully, here in Texas, our deer seem to be very resistant. We don't see very many die-offs from EHD or blue tongue. And to prove it, there were some studies done where they took blood from deer across the state, and they looked at antibodies in their blood, and I think it was about 80 something percent of deer had antibodies to EHD or blue tongue viruses, and a lot of times multiple varieties of the virus. The meaning they were exposed to and survived multiple exposures with those illnesses. So the deer here in Texas seem to be very resistant to it, and it's probably because in Texas we have droughty conditions far more commonly than they do in the Midwest,
Mm-hmm.
where we get those conditions that would cause those little biting midges that spread EHD uh, to show up. Maybe it got to a point where deer had developed immunities here in our part of the world, where thankfully we don't have to deal with that. But we still do see some deer each year that do die from EHD or blue tongue in Texas, and we do keep records of that when we have either deer that were proven through the medical lab that they died from it, or just where they had the apparent symptoms and they died in a manner that lines up with EHD or blue tongue, where you find them floating in a pond or in a creek, especially late summer. We do have a reporting process. So if hunters on the landscape do see that, they can contact the local biologist for the county they observe it in, and we can report that to the state wildlife veterinarian where they track at. And then moving on to CWD, we're fortunate, at least in Montgomery Walker County, where we have no free ranging chronic wasting disease uh, in our part of the world. So uh, we still test free ranging deer every single year. Any hunter who's interested in having their deer tested, I'm especially in Montgomery Walker County, I'm more than happy to do that for them. All they have to do is contact me, say, "Hey, I harvested a buck. It's at my house, or a doe, or it's at this processor or taxidermist or wherever it's at, and I can meet them there, collect the sample, and send it off free of charge. And to also be clear on that, it's not mandatory either. So if you don't want to get your deer tested, you don't have to get it tested as well. Uh, but it is an option for people, and we do test every year. So if y'all have a deer or anybody listening has a deer they harvest and they want tested, contact your local biologist, and they will happily do that for you.
Oh, that's
Oh,
awesome.
it's funny because not funny, but factual, I would say, because Mr. Larry Weissoon, he said pretty much the same thing you reiterated here just a second ago, that the Texas deer seem to have antibodies to the EHD blue tongue virus. Um, I don't know if you remember catching that, Seth, when we had Mr. Larry on.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought that's really cool that you pretty much reiterated the same exact facts that he did, and why we don't see these outbreaks as bad in our region. But I also wanted to say something about native deer. He said something, and this is not you,
Mhm.
John. This is just something Larry said, that CWD wasn't a big thing here either because of some sort of like resilience or something to it. I don't know if that's factual or not, but
Yeah,
maybe he just meant EHD blue tongue.
I think I
Um,
think he kind of um, concluded some of the same types of data was that for whatever reason, deer are just a little bit more
Resilient deer.
resilient to the infection. It's not that it doesn't occur; it's just our deer don't die from it. Some of that it does exist. It's not like it's not on the landscape. So, but yeah, but for whatever reason, because I think we joked off air about like when there's any sort of concepts about how we can reproduce those antibodies, and introduce it to like a different herd in a different region and have that be some sort of genetic benefit like in the long term or something. That we were talking about that off air. It was just like a complete like theoretical type of thing, but everything's better in Texas, so
Oh
and it's
yeah, and I think with the Midwest, there would have to be enough selection pressure on that herd to develop immunity to EHD, and it happens so infrequently. At least from what I've observed, it's pretty seems pretty bad when it does happen, but the good thing about deer is deer are really good at making more deer.
hmm
And so after after losing, a pretty decent herd, the sad part is a lot of times it seems like they may lose some of that uh, older age class of bucks, and they may not be able to harvest what would be considered like a trophy buck for several years, just because you're waiting for that age class to catch back up. But the good news is, especially with EHD, is it's just a it's a fast, abrupt blip, but it goes away, and deer are really good about making more deer. And so uh,
So
that's
I got
a
a question for you here. Since you're saying that deer good at making more deer, has this whenever you said the numbers were low, uh, back in the early '80s when they were trying to do their studies, is how the population. Did they try to reintroduce whitetail by moving whitetail around and over here? At all? Do you know of?
yeah. I actually was curious about that, and you know, back on that genetic talk, a lot of people always bring up about like, no, bringing in South Texas deer, and well, over from the 1940s up until the 90, I think 1991, Parks and Wildlife was stalking deer in the piney woods, um, and all the deer that he stalked the piney woods with came from South and Central Texas.
yeah.
So I, I
Trapping them in
think
the
it was
neighborhoods.
I think it was 12,149 deer stalked across East Texas, um, uh, from South and Central Texas. So a pretty significant amount of deer were brought in uh, to the piney woods. Uh,
Cool. Was any of that into the public lands or just specifically Piney Woods, meaning public, like deer
uh,
leases, etc.?
I don't have where they actually did
Okay.
it. I do have it broken down. I have a paper that has it broke down by county, and the paper's open to everyone as well.
I've heard some
Uh,
myths from old schools that have hunted these woods for over
yeah,
40 years. So,
if you look up the Piney Woods Deer Herd Status Report on Parks and Wildlife, it was by Gary Spencer. Uh, on page one, it has the history of white-tailed deer in piney woods, and it says like the restoration, and it has 12,149 deer were brought in from 1938 until the 90s, and
but
then
they're still
below that,
native deer. They weren't
yeah,
like
yeah,
dropped from the north or anything. They're native deer. They're still native genetics. They're just from different regions of the state.
yep, and then on
Okay.
page two, it has
No
it
wonder why
broke
our
down
deer are
by
so
county.
short. Some West Texas deer.
Yep,
Like little dogs out here. No, I'm just kidding.
but
So, with that, disease come, these deer face many challenges other than hunters. So, like predation, is that a big, how bad is predation and how bad does it affect the population? Do you know of? And what are things that we can do about it to help out and keep our deer population strong?
as far as predation, I mean, it definitely occurs. I've seen evidence. I've walked up on fawns that have been you know consumed by coyotes or uh, but as far as making a meaningful impact, especially with our deer population continuing to trend in a upward direction, I would say the pressure they're exerting on the deer herd is relatively low, um, and it's not um, really interfering or negatively impacting deer, at least in our area, um, because that population's going up. Coyotes, they're native and they do have to eat, and you can't blame them for doing what they have to do. But if hunters want to get out there and pursue, uh, predators, as long as they have a valid hunting license and an APH if required, if they're on public, by all means, I support and encourage anyone to do any form of legal hunting because that's what it's all about, getting people outside and hunting. So if you enjoy predator hunting, call in or just shoot them as they walk by all means, go and do it. I don't think it will make a meaningful impact as far as,
There's
you
too
know,
many.
yeah, I don't think it'll make like, more fawns on the landscape just because, people aren't going to kill enough. Um, but if it's what they enjoy doing, I support it 100%.
It's a fun hunt, calling predator calling and stuff like that. Those can be some really cool, exciting hunts too.
I've
And
done
then
it a few times, and it's pretty exciting. Although sometimes you get that fawn in distress, and you get a doe coming out, uh, ready to fight the call.
yeah,
Yep. Yep. She's pretty ticked off trying to stomp on it.
Yeah,
Uh,
and that is.
speaking of,
I was gonna say it's not a legal method for hunting, so do not do that for does.
yeah, I know, right? Get you in trouble. I've used a fawn call, a fawn bleat in bow season before to see if I can get a doe to come out. Never worked, but I tried it once.
Yeah.
Because I heard it could work. Who knows?
Oh,
Uh,
I just meant with the electric call.
oh yeah, don't do
oh
that.
yeah.
Yeah, no electric
I'll get
calls.
you in trouble. No electric calls. Yeah, I'll get you in real big trouble. Speaking of calling, so and our friend, Rick Solzy, he's just a hunter out there in the Sam, and he's been hunting out there. One of those guys, 30, 40 years plus, and he uh he was talking about back in the day, they used to have turkeys and you could hunt them, and he's got a journal of the turkeys that he's gotten to harvest over the years out there before they didn't really have turkeys to harvest anymore, and it's been pretty much shut down. I mean, a lot of people like talking about it. We like knowing about it a little bit. It'd be cool one day. I don't think it'll happen in my lifetime, but why aren't there many turkeys out there? And do you know why? And what were the state's efforts to try to make something happen? And what's the report
So
now?
I'm not sure exactly the timelines on the restocking efforts for turkeys. I know in certain areas you'll see those NWTF signs that are on trees that haven't been burned all the way up yet, but there was a restocking effort in our area years ago where they put turkeys out. They persisted a little while, but eventually they just kind of dwindled out. And what a lot of times, we want one item to point our finger at and say, it's the feral pigs or, it's they're burning too much ground or whatever people say. And the reality is that it's about probably 1,000 different reasons why, but the biggest ones that show up in my mind are, we have huge amounts of brush encroachment. The piney woods historically would not have had as much brush as we see today. Yopon being probably the worst offender for that. And now we also have new varieties of brush coming in, like McCartney Rose, Chinese Privet, things that shouldn't be here in the first place that I'm seeing more and more frequently in Montgomery Walker County. So we have that brush encroachment that's occurring, and so that's taken away from good poult rearing ground, and it's just too thick for turkeys to really traverse. We also have problems with feral pigs and fire ants, introduced species that don't belong. Uh, and it's not necessarily that they are predating on the turkey like directly. They're not hunting them out. It's just there's so many pigs on the landscape today. You know, if they happen upon a nest, they're pigs. They're going to take
It's easy
advantage.
food. They're gonna eat
Yeah,
it.
yeah, 100%. And so they actually had turkeys on the Powderhorn, one of the places I used to do prescribed burns on, and uh, they had cameras on nests, and pigs would readily consume those uh, those turkey nests. And it's
Mm.
not because, like I said, they were hunting them out. It's just there's so many pigs on the landscape. When they happen to find it, they will take advantage of it. And then Other reasons, lack of fire. We don't. The National Forest does a really good job of burning, but they're only in control of 160,000 acres in the 3 county area around me. There's far more acreage than that around us, and you can't burn subdivisions, and subdivisions don't make great turkey habitat either. And if you've been in Walker County or Montgomery County, you've noticed one thing is far more subdivisions going in than there were here 20 years ago.
Mm. Mm.
And so it's urbanization, lack of fire and brush, along with increased amounts of predators on the landscape through introduced species primarily.
Yeah, and I think I can't remember if we were talking about this kind of offline at one point. And those restocking efforts are, granted, people would pitch in for the effort, but it's very expensive. Something like $1,200
Yeah,
a bird, $1,100 a bird, something like that. Or
I'm not sure on the cost exactly. I'd have
okay,
to look it up, but it's not a cheap endeavor, and the land you have to put it together, you have to have at least 5,000 contiguous acres of good turkey habitat to get a stocking going. Um, Thankfully, some hope though is in Walker County up along the river, there are turkeys that are being seen uh, up that way, and it seems like it's from a restocking effort further upriver, but they're dispersing kind of down the river.
mm-hmm.
Um, and it's certainly not at huntable levels, but the hope is there, and hopefully these landowners who have turkeys are, uh, you know, continuing to manage their woods in a good manner that benefits them and all other wildlife, and hopefully these turkey will take off.
So you're saying there's a chance?
there, there's a chance, and you know, I love turkeys. I think it'd be a wonderful thing to have an opportunity to hunt for or go after in these counties. But at the moment, it's not a possibility. But down the road, nobody knows.
Yeah. Well, we are right at time, man. I know you were we were grateful enough and you were gracious enough to give us some, to give us some of your time during normal business hours here. So we want to be respectful of your time. So, Rudy, you good, man?
I'm good. I really appreciate you coming on, and I just want to reiterate the importance of John, folks. He's offering us a lot here. When he says that he's willing to come out, age your deer, score it. This is more than just trying to help you, but it's helping everybody. And I really hope that you utilize your resources at your fingertips, especially if you're somebody that uses data like this to be successful and use this data to go on other hunts. Maybe out of state, and give this opportunity for out of state hunters to have data to look at, and what they could be looking forward to coming into our state, and the expectations they may have. Because, hey, we may not have 180-inch bucks running everywhere, but we do have some nice deer, and having that data to show that, and having an expectation when someone comes out to hunt would be nice. So please use John, and don't be afraid to give him a call, and we'll be sure to find a way to get his information, maybe in the description or something, and we can get him out there to your place. I'm probably going to use him here pretty soon. So I got a deer that I just shot, and we're hopefully going to get one tonight. So we'll see.
Well, yeah, and it doesn't sound like the most important thing to some folks, but guys like John, they can't make the best decisions for us if they don't have the data and the specifics on the information. So he's the guy. These guys, they are out there working. I used to, think it was just offices in Austin somewhere, and I never seen these guys. John has been very, upfront and very visible, and wanting to be involved, man. So we really appreciate that, and kind of making yourself available as a resource. Don't want to see you get bombarded with anything, but we just want people to know that you're out there working hard, and other folks in y'all's department and team are doing the same, and to keep what we do a lot of fun, and keep the, like Larry would say, managing the resources wisely.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, guys.
Yeah, and we got some more plans. We've been tossing around some ideas on other things we can do in the future together. So hopefully we can work with you on that. Looking forward to that. So we definitely want to have you back on, do some postseason stuff, see what you guys are learning, and maybe even do some field interactions, some things like that you've brought up. Getting really creative on some of those ideas. So I'm looking forward to that. So, but with that said, that'll be for another time. So big thanks to Jon for jumping on and spending the time with us. Thanks you guys for watching the podcast and listening. You can find all the audio versions across Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the whole 9 yards. But it's a lot more fun to watch on YouTube. You can put a face with Jon and know him when you see him. He's come out to the hunters meet and greet and handed out cards and just made himself available to answer any questions. So thank you guys for checking out the channel. And before you leave, just don't forget, subscribe and come back and find Jon next time and go back and watch some of these other podcasts that we post on, because we got some really good stuff and we're coming into the season, so we look forward to putting out some really cool hunts out there for you guys. So thanks for stopping and checking out the channel, and we'll see you on the next one.